Le vice-président du SCFP, Charles Fleury, à nous présenter notre invité d'honneur.
Good morning, everyone. Bonjour à tous. My name is Charles Fleury. I'm the Secretary-Treasurer of the Canadian Union of Public Employees, the largest union in Canada with over 680,000 members, including around 150 members on the school sector. Working with the Broadband Institute or being a major sponsor of this summit has always been important for us. Encore une fois, cette année, la qualité des conférenciers et des panélistes prouve que notre engagement envers l'Institut Broadband est le sommet sur le progrès et un partenariat inspirant. Et la prochaine conférencière est elle-même des plus inspirantes. C'est donc avec un immense plaisir que je vous présente Jaclyn Corin. Jaclyn Corin is a student for Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Portland, Florida. She's a survivor of the mass shooting that killed 17 of her classmates and teachers. Less than a week after the shooting, she mobilized 100 of her classmates and brought them on a lobbying trip to the state capitol. Soon after, she continued her advocacy and became a leader organizer of the March for Our Lives. At the march, she brought Yolanda Rini King to the stage, granddaughter of Martin Luther King Jr., where she preached that the young people of today are a part of the great generation. Jaclyn Corin est en contact continuel avec les leaders étudiants de partout aux États-Unis, mettant sur pied des événements locaux et des blitz d'inscription d'électeurs, tout en faisant la promotion de chapitres March for Our Lives dans d'autres villes. Jaclyn Corin a fait la promesse de dédier sa vie à la lutte contre la violence par les armes à feu et sera pour toujours une personne qui se battra pour défendre tous les types de justice sociale. Please give a warm welcome to Jaclyn Corin.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. My name is Jaclyn Corin. I'm an 18-year-old girl from Parkland, Florida in the US. I just wanted to thank all of you for allowing me to share my story today and the Broadband Institute for all of the incredible work that they're doing. I will never wake up on February 14th and feel the love generated by Valentine's Day ever again. The universal day of admiration and compassion developed into something so catastrophic in a matter of 7 minutes. I will always remember hiding in a dark classroom, shaking beyond belief, even though I knew the shooter was on the other side of the campus. I will always remember that I was in the same building just 15 minutes before, delivering carnations to my fellow classmates. I will always remember my mind constantly repeating, "It could have been me. It could have been me." I will always remember my thoughts evolving into, "It still can be me. The shooter hasn't been caught yet. It still can be me." However, after the 2 longest hours of my life, I finally escaped Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, ushered out by agents of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and a Special Weapons and Tactics team. Police sirens wailed around me, but all I could hear was the thumping of my broken heart. My body tried giving in to my exhaustion, but I forced my legs to maintain a rapid speed on my race home, hurtling over Valentine's Day teddy bears thrown erratically on the streets of Parkland. I kept turning around to focus my eyes on the 3-story building that held an unknown amount of newly murdered bodies, a building that was flooded with unjustified hate on a day of true love. Thousands of people in my community would now have to redefine their new normal, one filled with anxiety attacks, memorial visits, and vacant desks. The morning after the shooting, my eyes opened at a miserable 6 a.m. to see 17 names plastered all over social media. My ear-piercing screams rang throughout the house until my throat felt like it caught fire. Jamie Guttenberg, Joaquin Oliver, Aaron Feiss. These were people I saw just yesterday walking the halls of my ordinary high school, but now are forever ingrained in history as victims of a massacre. You know, before the shooting at my high school on February 14th, 2018, I was just a normal American high school student living in a small town unknown to most. In just 6 minutes and 20 seconds, however, my town became the epicenter of the world as 17 hearts stopped beating. 17 brothers, sisters, parents, friends, mentors, coaches, students were murdered in our classrooms and hallways. Another 17 people were injured with physical wounds that might heal, but emotional wounds that would never. The shooting in Parkland joined the list of the worst mass shootings in American history, a list that no one wants to be a part of. There's not a day that goes by when I'm not reminded of the shooting. When I hear the sounds of sirens or fireworks, I'm taken back to that horrific afternoon. Yet, our community isn't alone in its tragedy. In 2017 alone, nearly 40,000 Americans died as a result of guns, an average of 109 people a day. There were 24 school shootings that resulted in gun-related deaths or injuries in 2018. The worst part is, far too many stories of gun violence go untold or are forgotten back home as the American society willingly moves on. Young people, specifically those who reside in low socioeconomic areas, grow up with gun violence as their reality. Days without gunshots as their background noise seem unusual. Perhaps the one thing that is worse than the continued gun violence is the normalization of it. We are coerced by continual propaganda into believing that this reality cannot be changed, as guns have been completely and totally fused into our culture, largely due to the NRA's influence on American politics. The NRA, which is short for National Rifle Association, is a group that was founded in 1871 as a recreational group designed to promote and encourage rifle shooting on a scientific basis. But in 1977, it formed its own Political Action Committee, or PAC, to channel funds to legislators. The NRA is now among the most powerful special interest lobby groups in the US, with a substantial budget to influence, or bribe, members of Congress on gun policy. It's pretty similar to the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights, the CCFR here, which, if you guys didn't know, started a campaign telling members to file complaints against a doctor advocating for stricter gun control. Someone that actually sees the results of gunshot wounds, someone that is just trying to save people's lives. When I got home from the shooting, I quickly recognized that I couldn't sit back and watch the NRA win once more. I couldn't allow the everlasting list of mass shootings to continue to grow. I needed my still beating heart and my still functioning brain to be put towards something that would benefit others. So I shoved one more factor into what would become my new normal: civic engagement. The next day, thank you. The next day, the city of Parkland held a vigil at our local soccer field. It was the largest gathering that my town had ever seen. Thousands stood side by side in silence to commemorate the lives we lost just a day before. You know, I'd grown up seeing pictures of huge vigils to honor victims of gun violence, Sandy Hook, Vegas, but never in my wildest dreams would I have thought one day a vigil would occur in my community. And once the ceremony concluded, I navigated my way through the crowd towards the stage where a congresswoman stood, a US congresswoman. Now, this was totally out of character for me. I was never involved in politics and was definitely more introverted than I was extroverted. But all fear seemed to leave my body because I told myself I was a vessel for change. I was still alive, and because of that privilege, I just couldn't sit back. So I didn't give her a choice but to listen to my plan to bring Stoneman Douglas students up to Tallahassee, the Florida state capital, to push for gun safety legislation on a state level. I was expecting to hear a "it's too soon" to get political comment, but because, that's usually how it goes after a mass tragedy like this in the United States. But instead, I spotted a little glimmer of hope in her eyes. She embraced me tightly and thanked me for wanting to stand up so soon. And she immediately connected me with the person that could make my vision a reality: a Florida state senator. From that day forth, I worked on and successfully organized a trip for over 100 of my classmates to travel to our state capital and engage in over 70 different congressional meetings. But it wasn't only me that felt this calling to speak out. Many of my friends in Parkland, along with the millions of young people around the country, were suddenly so aware that we were the ones who could break the cycle of gun violence in America. Together, we organized the March for Our Lives in DC, one of the largest youth-led protests in US history, where about 1 million people joined us in our fight. It created a national, even international uproar, making the issue of gun violence #1 in importance among young people in our country. Parkland students like me demanded justice side by side with students and young people from all walks of life. We shared stories of loss and called out our elected officials as their complacency kills us every single day. The march in DC worked in conjunction with over 900 sibling marches all over the world, creating a sense of global solidarity against all types of gun violence. All children, no matter their country of origin, deserve to feel safe in their schools, their streets, and their homes. The March for Our Lives welcomed everyone with a sense of unity. It was the first time in a long time that many people in the United States felt hope. We wanted to continue to spread that hope as far as we could, which is why we dedicated our summer last year to traveling to communities around the US on our Road to Change tour. The participants on tour were not only students from Parkland, Florida, but from all over the US, giving a platform to students from communities that experience everyday gun violence. We bused to over 100 different communities in over half of the states in America and met hundreds of people who will never get to see their sons, daughters, sisters, brothers, boyfriends, girlfriends ever again. their lives stolen by a bullet. We even spoke directly with communities filled with people who didn't agree with us, and yet we still managed to find common ground among the most conservative Americans. On the tour, I learned the most from students my age that have lived drastically different lives. Their stories expanded my perspective on the issue of gun violence, and the broadened intersectionality of the movement served to strengthen our front. It was just another night on the Road to Change tour when I first met my friend Bria Smith. My friends and I were in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, at our usual nightly town hall when we heard a booming voice over the microphone. She preached about amplifying the voices of those that are unheard and forgotten. After all, she was one. Through her words, I learned that Milwaukee was one of the most segregated cities in the United States, and that its potent isolationism in turn leads to economic hardship and rampant violence. Bria said, seeing bodies with white sheets over them was normalized, seeing blood was normalized, seeing pictures of dead children taped to lampposts was normalized in her hometown. Growing up in an affluent area like Parkland, I was shielded from this widespread reality that Black and brown communities face. For a time, this fact made me feel nothing but guilt. From that day forth, though, Bria would serve as my main source of inspiration. She hopped on the tour bus, a vehicle filled with total strangers at the time, and spent the next 2 months educating thousands about what she goes through as a young Black woman in America and what ordinary citizens can do to help prevent gun violence in communities of color. She urged me to explore and accept my own privilege so I can help others to understand and advocate for a system that conforms to a specific people. Bria was just one of the many incredible individuals that I met through this whole journey, deepening my desire to organize against this issue. There are always difficult days where I just want to quit, but stories like hers push me to keep going. And on tour, I also learned the power of one, the power behind one voice, the influence it has to change minds. As I said earlier, we traveled to some pretty conservative, gun-loving areas this summer. Straight up, there were people walking the streets with assault rifles because they lived in open carry states. But I truly understood my power when I, a small teenage girl, could sway the mind of a 40-year-old huge man with 3 guns on his body because I appealed to shared values: love, family, safety. So with that, I urge you all to speak to those who don't agree with you. After all, times when you're uncomfortable are often the most productive. One singular moment, one encounter, one opportunity seized upon changed someone's mind. That's the power of one. Months after the tour, young people were still getting inspired to make a change in their communities. In fact, our recent midterm election in America showed a revolutionary youth voter turnout, a turnout that it's been in a turnout higher than it's been in 25 years, leading to a more representative government than our country has ever seen. A media analysis published by The Trace, a nonprofit news organization that tracks gun issues, found that in the 3.5 months after the shooting in my hometown, the number of news stories mentioning guns was more than double the number that appeared following any of the 7 worst mass shootings since 2013. Some national polls showed that gun policy had zoomed up to 3rd or 4th place among priorities for voters heading into the midterms, after the economy and healthcare, but even ahead of immigration and taxes. I mention these statistics because they explicitly prove the power of young people. There is a hero and change maker in every young person, And the goal of my organization, March for Our Lives, is not only to end gun violence, but also to inspire all of the untapped youth, the untapped energy in the US and beyond. We must continue to uplift stories of young people who have made a difference in order to awaken even more. Young people have been at the forefront of social change throughout history. Take a look at the American Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s. From its very beginnings, student activists were significant players in moving the needle of change forward. 18-year-old class president Charles Avery led 800 of his fellow classmates out of the doors of his high school in Alabama on a 10-mile walk to Birmingham City. Then there's the power of Malala, who at age 17 was the youngest person ever to be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Her will to survive an assassination attempt by the Taliban when she was an adolescent and already an activist propelled her to champion the rights of young girls and women in her country and around the world. Joshua Wong, another young activist, founded scholarism while in secondary school. Through his efforts, Wong established himself as the face of the pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong, inspiring other youth and multiple generations of adults into action. And let's not forget Canadian Craig Kielburger. He was just 12 years old in 1995 when he became impassioned about child labor rights, jump or leap forward, and today Kielburger is one of the most respected human rights advocates in the world, thanks to his work with Free the Children, Me to We Day, and a lot more. You know, leadership is taking responsibility for enabling others to achieve shared purpose under conditions of uncertainty. Exhausted by indifference and ineptitude, inspired by the desperate need for change, these young change makers, and all of you, are turning anger into passion and pain into movement forward. And always remember the power of one. What I love about the power of one is that it means we don't have to tackle everything all at once in order to see real change in our lives. Trying to attack every aspect of our lives at the same time is simply so overwhelming. It is a recipe for confusion, disappointment, and burnout. The power of one means that we can effect huge transformation in our lives by taking the next step forward. In other words, we don't have to change everything for everything to change. And in summary, leaders are not just connected by pain, but by desire. Recently, we've watched a flame of passion grow into a roaring fire of young people, ready and willing to change the world. We are a generation that knows that if a problem affects one of us, it affects all of us. A generation that advocates for a system that fights for us and not a system that we have to fight. We must all continue to be bold in our calls for change, intersectional in our demands for equity and safety, and relentless in our quest for justice. And it's up to us to build the next generation of leaders too. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dave Bulmer. I am the president of MAPSEAL, Ontario's professional employees. Before we move on with my remarks, though, on behalf of the Broadband Institute, I'm going to ask the room if you wouldn't mind standing for a moment of silence, and we'll observe the victims of gun violence around the world. Thank you very much. Good morning, friends. It is my pleasure to be with you here today.